Welcome to Series 2 of the Great British Quilter podcast. I'm Sarah Ashford and I can't wait to share with you my fantastic lineup of guests over the next 8 episodes. I'll be meeting with authors, quilters, shop owners and industry professionals to find out more about them and how they contribute to the world of quilting that we know and love. A huge thank you goes to Orifil Thread, who have generously sponsored this series and helped make it possible. Orifil is an Italian thread company specialising in superior quality cotton threads for professional and domestic quilters. With a wide range of threads in varying weights and a beautiful spectrum of colour, quilters can find the perfect thread for their project. Do visit orifil.com for more information. My guest today is Leisa Morris White, founder of Morris Textiles, based in Austin, Texas. Leisa has always been obsessed with fabric and has loved sewing since she was a little girl. Her grandma V taught her embroidery and English paper piecing, and she still loves hand sewing. Although Leisa's always loved to sew, she only started quilting when she moved to the States 12 years ago. Leisa has a passion for traditional British design like William Morris and Liberty of London, but she also loves to mix these classics with modern fabrics and designs to make something totally new. Leisa is originally from Liverpool, a beautiful city on the water in the northwest of England. After finishing university, she ran a retail business selling household textiles before moving to the US in 2007. Leisa now lives in Austin, a beautiful city in the heart of Texas with her American husband, 3 children, and Wheaton Terrier Seamus. Morris Textiles brings together Leisa's love of British design and fabric with her retail experience. Leisa is passionate about fabric and all things sewing, but also great customer service and giving back to the wonderful quilting community on both sides of the pond. With Morris Textiles, Leisa highlights British designers and makers, stocking Liberty of London Tana Lawns and quilting cottons, William Morris prints, Oakshott fabrics and collections from other contemporary fabric designers and companies. I first met Leisa at Quilt Con in Nashville, Tennessee back in February 2009. We've since worked together on several projects and collaborations, and it was an honour to work on her booth at Quilt Con in Austin this year. We had planned to record this podcast in person at the Festival of Quilts in the summer, but sadly due to the lockdown this was not to be. I do hope you will enjoy listening to our Zoom conversation just as much. Hello Leisa, how are you?
Hi Sarah, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. We were meant to meet up, weren't we, at the Festival of Quilts, and sadly that couldn't happen this year, which was such a shame.
No, I know. Yeah.
So how has lockdown been for you?
So it's been a real combination. I was actually in England in March visiting family with my youngest daughter when the whole lockdown thing came into action. So that was hard, being away from the rest of my family. My husband and my other daughter were visiting my son in college in the US. And we had to leave England earlier than planned because flights were getting cancelled. So it was sort of hard to be separate from the rest of my family and to have to leave my family in England unexpectedly and not know when I was going to see them again, really. So that was a little stressful. But since we were all back together in Austin, it was fine for us. You know, my husband can work from home. We felt very fortunate because he could do that. And my business could carry on because it's based at home. I have a studio in my back garden. So it was just a lot of together time, which was actually a bit of a bonus for me because I have teenage children and you don't get to see that much of them, you know, once they go off to college and they're always
busy, isn't it? And everyone's busy.
Yeah. So it was actually in that way, it was really nice to all be home together and be able to just, you know, do lockdown together. But I know it's been an incredibly tough and, you know, hard time for so many people. And I felt like it's been okay for us and I feel very fortunate.
Yeah. And you're in Austin, Leisa, aren't you? And you're from Liverpool, but you're living in Austin. So how long have you been there? And so do you call Austin home?
Yeah, so I have been in Austin for 8 years, and before that, we were in Illinois for 5 years. So my husband Brian's actually American. So we met in college. I was at Edinburgh University, and he was on his junior year abroad. And we met back in '94.
Was that in Edinburgh? In Edinburgh.
In Edinburgh in 1994. So he went back to finish his last year of college, and we dated long distance for a while. But then he moved to Edinburgh to earn his master's. So we married straight out of college, and we took over my grandparents' business, which was retail stores selling household textiles. So
textiles is in the family then?
It is, yeah, it is. So, Brian and I did that for 10 years, and it was great. But during that time, he also earned his MBA, and he did that part-time at Manchester. And then he decided he wanted to get a PhD, and that's when we moved to the States so that he could earn his PhD. So that was 13 years ago. It seems...
Wow.
Yeah, so when we moved, our children were 6, 4, and 11 weeks old. So
with an 11-week-old baby.
Yeah, it seems like a bit of a blur looking back on it. It's just like, oh, but no, it all worked out. And I have to say, I love living in Austin. I love the States. My friends have made here, both in Austin and in Champaign, Illinois, where we used to live. But I do still class Liverpool as home. It's
Liverpool's always going to be in your heart, isn't it?
It is. All my children were born there. All my family's there. So many close friends, lifelong friends. So I do really still feel like Liverpool is home. And my husband feels that way too. He lived there for a long time, and he misses it. But we do love living in the States. But yeah, I have to say Liverpool is still home.
And normally you get the best of both worlds, don't you? And you can fly between the two. And I guess that's what's made this year tricky, not being able to do that. But
no, it really has, because, usually I go and spend at least a month there in the summer. And obviously this year was different and we didn't get to do that. So, yeah, I do feel...
Hopefully.
Yeah. So we're gonna go for Christmas no matter what, even if we have to be in quarantine. We're gonna go and wave to people through the window.
Yeah, make it happen. So, how long have you been quilting? And do you have a particular technique that you love the most?
So, I only really started quilting when I moved to the States 13 years ago. I've always sewn. I've always loved to sew. I got my first sewing machine when I remember as a small child. I remember making my granddad a tie. I'm not sure what it looked like. I'm sure it was just cut out of fabric. But we're also a family of makers. There's always been people making things in the family. My dad's actually a trained tailor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he left school and he went to do a City and Guilds course in tailoring. He's never practiced as a tailor, but he always knew how to use a sewing machine, and he'd always help me out when I was taking sewing classes in school. And my grandparents, there was always a sewing machine set up at my grandparents' house. When you went over, you could always have a go on their industrial machine, because my granddad was always making things to sell in their stores, back in the day. He made Beatles bags in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
They weren't a licensed product, but it was just like some type of crossover bag that the Beatles had. And so he was always making things. And then on my mum's side, my grandma was a huge knitter. So going over to her house, there was always a knitting machine set up. So yeah, I've always sewn, but with the quilting, it's sort of, new in the last 13 years. But I do have to say my favorite technique in quilting is definitely English paper piecing.
Yeah, I had a feeling you might say that.
Yeah, well, I've always done English paper piecing. As a child, I used to make little hexagons with my grandma, and we'd sit and cut up old bits of fabric and old Christmas cards and stuff. You'd make those into English paper pieces. So, I love English paper piecing, and it's just so relaxing. I find it to be almost like a meditation. You can just pick it up and put it down, and it's so portable. You can take it in the car, you can take it when you're traveling. So yeah, for me, it's definitely English paper piecing. And I usually have pouch, a Sarah Ashford pouch in my bag. Those lovely ones with stitching meditation. And I usually have one of those in my handbag or in the car. So whenever I've got a few spare minutes, you can just pick it up and feel like you've done something for, even if it's only 5 or 10 minutes.
That's the beauty of it, isn't it? I sometimes take it when I'm at my children's sports practice, and I'm just sitting and watching, and they're just training, and you can just get a little bit done and then put it away again. It's really nice to do that.
Yeah, and you can listen to, podcasts, or you can listen to books on, I was going to say books on tape, that's aging me, but you can listen to audio books. No,
it's great. I agree with you. So we first met over 18 months ago now at Quilt Con in Nashville, and so much has happened for you since then. You've launched your company, Morris Textiles, and within the space of a year, you actually had your own booth at this year's Quilt Con in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the inspiration behind wanting to have a shop?
So my main inspiration was that I missed retail. So, I grew up in retail. I'm from a family of retailers. And, I mentioned that my husband and I took over my grandparents' business. And I grew up working in those shops. So I was always there as the Saturday girl. And then we took over that business and ran that for 10 years. And I took some time out when we moved to the States to be home with the children, but I always missed that interaction with customers.
Yeah.
I always found volunteer jobs, running like the non-profit gift bar at the local ballet company, and, things like that gave me that interaction still with customers. Because what I really love is helping people find things and putting together ranges that I think people are going to enjoy. And it's, that's really what brings me joy. And I think also around the time I met you, I'd had all these ideas going through my head and I wasn't quite sure how to focus in. I knew I was ready for a new challenge and I knew I wanted to get back into retail, but I wasn't sure exactly, what I was going to go into. And I just think my son left for college and all these ideas were going through my head. And then I think we met in Nashville. And just talking to you, it's like this light bulb went off, because I knew obviously I had a lifelong love of, British design and fabrics. And then when I spoke to you and I realized about all the contemporary designers out there as well, it just sort of was like, okay, I think there's an opening there for British design to focus in on just British designers. So I think it also
filled the gap, hasn't it? Because there isn't, as far as I'm aware, there's nowhere. There's no one place in the US to get British fabric and British designers, and you kind of exclusively do that, don't you?
Yeah, obviously there are other retailers in the US who have certain lines of fabric, but there's not one person who only focuses on British fabric. And obviously I love other fabrics as well. It's not like I only love British fabrics, but in retail, you have to focus in on something, and I couldn't carry everyone's fabric, but I knew about what I loved in British design, and then obviously all these great contemporary designers. I just thought there was an opening there that I was like, okay, this is it, and it just sort of all came together at once. And then when Quilt Con was announced that it was going to be in Austin, I just felt like, okay,
meant to be.
I was like, this is meant to be. This is the timing for me. I can't keep talking about it. I've got to do it this year and get it done. When we spoke in Nashville, I had like a year to get it ready for launching at Quilt Con in Austin. So that was also like a catalyst for me. It was like a little bit of a,
It's quite good to have like that sort of timeline, and knowing that was what you were working towards, to have the actual physical shop at Quilt Con and have all the behind the scenes, the website and all the infrastructure of a shop as well. So it was perfect timing, really, wasn't it?
It felt like fate. It felt like meeting you, and then Quilt Con being in Austin. Like I was like, okay, this is it. I've got to do it right now.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So what was the process that you went through of opening a shop and preparing for such a big show?
Yeah, well, it was really obviously being introduced to so many people in the UK quilting scene was great. and that helped me decide what I was going to stock.
Because you came over to the Festival of Quilts, didn't you? That's the summer beforehand.
Yeah, so I went to the Festival of Quilts, and I met up with you and some other UK designers. And then a friend of mine, Susan Champion, we walked around the show and she was telling me all the, British designers that she loves and all the fabrics she loves. So it was great to sort of see everyone there and meet people. So I met obviously yourself, and then Jenny Smith was there and Karen Lewis. So it was great to sort of meet them in person and decide what to stock. And then the next thing was really setting up all the accounts with suppliers in the US and the UK, and then creating the website and a social media and online presence, which is probably not something I know much about, but I've been learning on the job.
It's the only way to do it, isn't it? You just have to throw yourself in.
Well, with having the stores, we started with 2 stores and we ended up with 10 stores. So having stores, I knew a lot about opening shops.
Yeah.
But a quilting show is totally different. When you open in a shop, you have a lot of time in the planning, but then you have usually a week or so, or even longer, to physically get the shop ready to open. But with a show, you have one day to set up. So there's a lot of planning needed. And you have to plan it down to the last detail. Like if you get there and you haven't got something, you haven't really got time to run out and go and pick up the staple gun or something else that you need for setting up the store. And I did get some great advice from other people who've done shows before, which was so nice. People are so helpful and forthcoming with tips. I got, information from people when I walked the Festival of Quilts. Other vendors there were like, oh, well, yeah, make sure you get this. Make sure you've got a ladder. Make sure you don't forget this.
That whole practical side of things as well that you have to think of is because, like you say, if you don't have it, you're stuck. You need it. You've got a day to set up, and that is it.
And I'm hoping the first time was the hardest. Obviously, now I know what's involved. So it's just the first time is the hardest. But I did something that was a little bit strange, but it worked out. I decided to set up the whole stand in my living room before the show. So I bought some sort of faux flooring, like a cushion floor, so that you didn't get, it was easier on your joints when you're standing on the concrete floor all day. So I bought one, and I wanted to see how long it took to put together, it took to put up in reality, because obviously you've not got much time setting up during the day. So I set that up in the living room, and then I was like, okay, that looks good. Maybe I'll just try the fixtures on it to make sure they work on it. So we put the fixtures up, which my son had put together. We bought them in IKEA, and he did all that for me. He was on his break from college. And then it sort of snowballed from there. I was like, okay, I'll just try this. So we ended up with the whole stand set up in my living room for 3 weeks. But it worked out really well because I really got to see how the stand would work, and I changed a lot of things based on that. So
yeah, I think it's a brilliant idea, because then when you went to the show, you knew exactly how you wanted it, and you'd already done your sort of changing your mind and moving things around. So then when it came to it, you were there and you were good to go.
Yeah, and it was a real conversation starter when people came over.
I bet. Did they have anywhere to sit?
No, there was no sofa that got pushed.
Oh dear. So tell me more about the products that you stock and the designers that you feature.
Okay, so it's all British fabrics, patterns and sewing notions. So there's a lot of them, and I don't want to just list them, so I'll tell you a little bit about some of them. So like I stock Liberty Tana Lawsn, which are some of my favourite fabrics. I've had a long love affair with Liberty since I was a child. My parents went to London on a work trip and brought me back this little frame that was covered in Liberty fabric. I was probably about 8, and I still have the frame in my studio, and I just loved it. It was all these paisley patterns, and so I've always loved Liberty. And the Tana Lawns are so great for the clothes. They're great for hand sewing. I love using them for English paper piecing, and they also make beautifully soft quilts. There's nothing like the feel of that. Very soft. For a special quilt, the Tana Lawsn is just perfect.
Really special.
And I also love that they're just such classic designs. So I stock the Tana Lawns, and then I also stock the Liberty Quilting Cottons, which you've got that classic Liberty design, but on a quilting weight cotton. So they're really great for lots of projects and for quilts. I stock William Morris prints, which I've always loved the art and craft movement and the heritage of the William Morris designs. So they're some of my favorites. I have Oakshott plains, which are beautiful, beautiful cottons. They're really special, aren't they? They're like the warp and weft combination they use. It creates like a sheen, and they mix really well with the Liberties as well. So I love using those, and I love stocking those. And then I have other contemporary designers. I have Your Fabrics, the Great British Quilter Back to Basics range, which have they're so fun and such great mixes. I love those. Sally Kelly's designs. I stocked her Fancy, which chilled really well at Quilt Con, and she's got a new range coming out in October called Solstice. So I'm really excited about that. And then other contemporary designers like Karen Lewis have had her fabric ranges. Jo Avery, I have her Aurifil sets, her book. And then obviously there's loads more, too many to mention, but I've got some Colette Mosscrop, Lucy Engels, Ernest Wright scissors. So I really also love a quality sewing notion, and their scissors are gorgeous. They're handmade in Sheffield still. I sell them. And then all the British designers Aurifil sets, I also stock those. And pattern designers, so I've got Jenny Smith's patterns. She does clothing patterns. I've got the Hepworth apron and the Riley top, which have been great for me. And Jenny also has the Quilting with Liberty book that's coming out shortly. That'll be out in November. Yes, that's just been revealed, hasn't it? And it looks absolutely beautiful. Yeah. So and I'm also always looking for British designers who are interested in working with me. So, I'll make sure that your contact details are put out as well, so that if anyone's listening who thinks they would be suitable to work with you, then that could be great. Yeah, that'd be great. And so, what was it like to be a vendor at Quilt Con? Obviously, we met before, and you were just there enjoying the show. And then a year later, you had your own booth, and I was there helping you. From my point of view, it was just so much fun meeting everybody, meeting the quilters, and just sharing our love of Britishness and fabric. I loved it. How was it for you? Oh my goodness, it was so much fun. It was a blast. That sounds American, I know, but it was a blast. It was really frightening at first, putting myself out there. I couldn't sleep in the run up to it because you never know. I was like, what if no one turns up? What if no one likes? What if my booth is empty and everyone else? Yeah, what if no one comes to my booth? We just stood there with nothing to do. I think those fears were eased during the setup day because the other vendors there were so supportive. People from the surrounding stands were coming on saying, oh no, people are going to love this stuff. And it really helped having my two aunts came from England to help me, the two calves. They're both called Catherine, but we call them the two calves. So that was really good to have them there to support me. They're both really experienced seamstresses, and they're also wonderful quilters, so that was great. And of course, having you and Jo there to help on the stand, you were both there a few hours each day. You ended up being there more than you expected, but that was really fun. And it was, I think we had a really good laugh, and I think people really enjoyed the whole Britishness of the stand. They enjoyed coming on and meeting people actually from England. That was lovely, wasn't it? And you were the only booth like it. You were very different to every other booth there, and I just remember people queuing to pay for their goods, but they didn't mind because we were laughing and we were having a joke, and people were so patient with us. And I feel like I threw you and Jo and both my aunts as well, really, on the till, on the cash register, without very much training. And I realized that I hadn't explained the whole difference with the American change. Oh, that was the tricky bit. Nickels and dimes and how the different sizes, it doesn't really make sense because the smaller ones worth more. But people were very patient. And
luckily they were very patient.
Yeah, I felt like there was a great atmosphere on there. So it was a great experience, meeting people that you sort of met online, but then they came on the stands and became friends. So yeah, it was a great, exhilarating and also exhausting experience, because when you have a shop, obviously I'm used to being in the shop all day, but you have a stock room and, but with a stand at a quilt show, there's nowhere else to keep stuff. So you have to... Yeah, it's all on. And I wanted to talk to everyone, and I really enjoyed talking to everyone. But I think by the end of the third day, I'd lost my voice a little. I was going to talk all day. Yeah. And I also had lots of great help from friends in Austin, just kept turning up just at the right moment to bring coffee or to help out. So no, it was a really fun experience.
And things have changed a lot since then. So how have you had to adapt your business? And what's next for Morris Textiles?
Yeah, things have changed a lot. So, I feel really lucky that I got to do Quilt Con, that we got to be there together, because that was in February. And then it was right after that everything changed. So,
right.
Yeah, so I had quite a few quilt shows planned for the year that all got cancelled, which I totally understand. So my strategy really had to change, because originally my plan was to do mainly quilt shows and then have the online be sort of the backup for the real shows. So that had to reverse. So it's really been about me getting the website and getting it to have everything on, uploading the stock. That, as I said, that's not really my forte. So that's been different for me, having to sort of, I feel like I'm good in person, but when with customer care, and it's just like having to switch over to doing it all online. So it's really been about building up a website and getting that running smoothly. And then I think I also need to improve my marketing. I'm a one-person operation at the moment, so I'm hoping once the whole pandemic things calm down here in the States, I can get some help on that side, when I can have people in my studio again. But next, it's just really, it's going to be hopefully collaborating with more people. So at the moment, I'm working with the Fred House UK on their block of the month. And I'm hoping to work more with Jo Avery, where she's going to be making more kits for some of her embroidery sets. And she's working on patterns that hopefully I can supply to the US market. So obviously she'll have them in the UK and I can supply them over here, save having to ship internationally and having that cost involved.
It's wonderful, that relationship that we have, isn't it? In that you're the gateway for us British designers to the US, and we are able to provide you with patterns and thread boxes and books, and it's just such a brilliant reciprocal relationship. And
I love it, and it makes me still feel so connected to the UK and, working with all these British designers. It's been great. And I'm also working with other people on patterns. So Jenny Smith, I mentioned earlier on, has got the book coming out, Quilting with Liberty, that's a celebration of 145 years of Liberty fabric. And this is the first ever official quilt book made with Liberty. So that's exciting.
That is exciting.
So I'm hoping to help Jenny promote the book in the US in whatever way I can. And we also worked on another pattern together called Love Letters Home, that came out earlier this summer, which is a really fun pattern it looks like an envelope with a heart. So it's sort of, it looks like a house and an envelope. So that's been a fun one to work on. And then also stocking new patterns and working with different people to bring new patterns for designers that might not already be sold in the US. And the next big thing I've got coming up is Quilt Con Together. So
yes, of course.
Yeah, so that show is going to be going ahead next year, and I'm signed up to be a vendor at that. So I guess I'll be learning more about doing live videos. Yes,
because for people who don't know, that's a virtual show, isn't it? They're not having the in-person show. They decided early on to go down the virtual route. So QuiltCon Together is a virtual event that you're part of. So
and I think that's going to be great. It's going to bring it to a wider audience. Anyone from around the world can come to Quilt Con together. So I need to get myself organised for that, because it's going to be a different approach than the last Quilt Con.
Yes, of course. Yes,
it's such
a learning curve this year for everyone, hasn't it?
It has, but that's the thing. People are adapting, and
and you just have to adapt and innovate, don't you?
New skills.
So you're obviously very busy with Morris Textiles, but are you finding any time for personal projects at the moment?
Well, yes and no. So building Morris Textiles has been my main project. So making samples for patterns I sell or anything else I sell, that's for fabric lines, I guess I'd say, has been my main project. But that doesn't really, it still feels personal, because I only sell things I love. So I'm making things I love.
And it doesn't feel like work almost.
No, it doesn't feel like work. So they're not technically personal projects, but, I'm still enjoying making those. I always have hand sewn on the go, as I was saying earlier. So that's, I've got a hexie quilt that just grows a few inches every year. So, my hand sewn is always an ongoing personal project. But the main thing is I love making gifts. So I just love making a baby quilt or a quilt for a family member. And my whole family got together and worked on a quilt for my grandma's 90th birthday last year. And that was so much fun.
And you organised that, didn't you?
I did, yeah. So obviously I wasn't sure the response I'd get. I just sent out an email to my whole huge extended family and was like, I want to make a quilt for grandma, but I think it'd be so much more special if everyone got involved. And they really did. People who'd never sewn before made a block. People who, could sew but had never quilted made a block. And then they all sent them back to me and I put them all together into a quilt. And
That's
she
amazing.
absolutely loved it. Yeah, so that was really fun.
So how did it work then? Sorry, just going on a tangent slightly. How did that work? Did you send them out fabric to use so that it was cohesive, or?
So I left some fabric in Liverpool with my 2 aunt calves for them to give to anyone who wanted the fabric. But I also said, if you want to use your own fabric, that's fine. Just make sure that it's blue and preferably Liberty, because I wanted to keep some type of theme to the whole quilt to make it tie together.
Yeah.
Because if everyone was making like a totally different block, I felt like at least if it's the same type of fabric, it will bring the whole thing together.
Yeah.
So there was some there for them to have, or they could use their own. So it was a combination. And then once they'd made the block, they posted them back to me in the US. And then I made the top and then quilted it and put it all together.
And you actually gave it to her. Were you in person? Were you able to give it to her in person?
I actually wasn't in person. So she had a surprise 90th birthday party because my grandma doesn't really like much fuss, but they decided they had to do a party. So it was a surprise. And I couldn't be there because my children were still in school. It was just before the winter break when we broke up for Christmas. So I was there via FaceTime. So I got to see a receipt.
For her reaction, I bet.
And my uncle walked me around the party on the phone. So I saw a reaction, but I wasn't actually there.
No.
But yeah, I've seen it, and she really did love the quilt. So that's the last big quilt I made. But I am actually working on one quilt that's an ongoing project called the Brick Quilt.
Oh.
So it's a pattern I'm making up. It's just random blocks. So every fabric range I get in from different British designers, if there's anything grey or blue within that, or mustard or yellow, it's going into this one quilt. So I'm making random blocks, and I'm not quite sure when it's going to be finished. But the idea is that it's going to be all British designers in one quilt. So.
One quilt. Oh, and it's really fun to work in that organic way sometimes and not just have too much of a plan and just go with it.
Oh, no, I love to do that, just to make it up as I go along. It doesn't always work out, but, you know.
It's all part
of the process.
Before we end, I like to offer our listeners 2 top tips to take home with them. So I was just wondering whether you had any top tips that you could share, maybe relating to quilting or business or social media. What are your thoughts?
Okay, on business, I would say focus in on your strengths and build around those strengths. So obviously my Britishness I see as a strength because I know British design and what I like. And I think my other strength is I love dealing with customers and I love giving good customer service. So I feel like I was able to bring those two together in Morris Textiles. You know, I like to give every order a little personal touch. I like to write a note and like connect with my customers. So yeah, I would say find what you love, find what, you know, calls to you and focus in on your strengths within that area. And yeah, I'd say focus in and build around what you love and bring together your strengths.
I agree with that, definitely. If you're passionate about it, then it won't feel like work a lot of the time. It comes from the heart.
Well, you know, my sister says I'm such a shy person usually, and I'm quite quiet and not very talkative. But my sister says when you get talking about fabric, it's like you get this fabric face.
Fabric face.
Fabric face. And you just don't, we can't shut you up. So, yeah. If you do what you love, it's always better.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Leisa. It's been.
Oh, I've got one more tip.
Oh, sorry, I'm cutting you short.
No, I thought of another tip, not a business tip, but a fabric tip. And that would be just to use your good fabric. You know, I know a lot of people have a stash, and especially with Liberty, people have a stash that they don't ever want to use, but I just never regret using my best fabric. I feel like when I use it, I always love the project more at the end.
Yes.
And if you're going to put so much time and effort into making something special, especially for someone else, you're gonna really fall in love with it while you're making it if you're using fabric you love, and then you're gonna be so much happier with the end result. So yeah, so cut into it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Leisa. It's been fascinating talking to you. And I really hope that we get to see each other in person again soon.
I know, hopefully before too long. I guess we'll see each other virtually, definitely at Quilt Con together.
Yes. And then fingers crossed for Festival of Quilts in 2021.
Yeah, I hope so too. It was great to see you, Sarah.
Take care. Thank you, Leisa.
Bye.
Thank you once again to my sponsor, Orifil Thread, for making this podcast possible. I hope you've enjoyed listening. I would love it if you would rate and review and subscribe to the Great British Quilter podcast, and please do tell your friends.